Hello, everybody. My name is Knut. I work for GameAnalytics, and I'm going to show you something about analytics, not specifically about our product, but it applies to any product. And the topic of the talk is how to analyze engagement in a game. And engagement is just one small part of the whole kind of game. And I'm going to show you why this is then so important. The talk is geared towards those that are curious about analytics or maybe already started using analytics. So I hope to show you how far common sense can go in using analytics. We often get questions like, why can't I just use the numbers to design a good game? Is that possible? And the answer is that no, we can only use analytics to inform ourselves about how our game is doing. So if you develop a game, let's say for the iPhone, you put it into the App Store, you're not making any money, you can use GameAnalytics to understand why you are not making any money. But it cannot tell you how to design your game so that you will make money. It's just to give you some information about what's going on. The presentation, I'm going to focus on free-to-play games on mobile. This is kind of where the big market is going, so also where our business is focused. And when we look at these games, we see that there is a model explaining a lot of the mobile free-to-play games. And it all starts with a fancy word called acquisition. And what it means is user acquisition and player acquisition and so on. And this is essentially getting users to install your game. If you have your game in the App Store, you need people to come to the app page and click on the install button. And there's thousands of companies in the user acquisition business that can help you do this. And once your users are installing your game, they get into what is called the onboarding process in the industry. And this essentially means a tutorial of some sort. This is your chance to convince users that your game is worthy of their time. You might have a few minutes for a mobile game to show that this game is actually fun, that the user should spend time, get engaged, get emotionally engaged with the game. If you're doing a PC title or a console title, you might have hours before users kind of say, nah, I don't care anymore about this game, but on mobile, it's only a couple of minutes. Those users that make it through the onboarding process, they have the chance of becoming what is called engaged users. And this means users that are coming back to the game, users that are regular players. They might play once a week, a couple of times a week, or maybe even a few times a day. This is the kind of users that you want. Happy users in itself might be a goal for you. And if it's not yet, I'm going to try to explain why it should be. These users that are happy and really enjoy playing your game, they might actually get to a point in the game where they can invite their friends, for example. Let's say you have implemented Facebook as a viral channel. Users can then challenge their friends or tell their friends about the game and so on. And this can then drive more users to your game. The users might also get to a point where they can pay money in the game. Let's say it's going to take a few sessions before they run out of a certain resource, and then they need to spend real money to buy more of that resource. It's going to take some time before this happens. It might, depending on your game, it might take a week, it might take a day, it might take months. So you want users to be far into your game when they start monetizing, because then they're really invested into the game. And this money you make on the monetization, you can then take all of it or parts of it and spend it on marketing, essentially promoting your game through ads or magazines or blogs or whatever. If you're buying ads, the click would then go to the App Store, and the users would install the game back again. And we see that there is a loop in this thing. That if you have a lot of users becoming engaged users and becoming monetizing users, you can spend a lot of money on marketing, thus again bringing even more users into your game. So for the purpose of this talk, I've come up with a game that is close to my heart. It's called Ultimate Drag Racing. I asked to make it called Knut's Ultimate Drag Racing, but the designers wouldn't have it. It's a game where you race a sleek-looking car like a Toyota Supra or a BMW M5 down a quarter-mile track. Each race takes maybe less than 15 seconds. So on a mobile, where you might play 2 or 3 minutes each session, you can do a couple of races. This game might seem very familiar to some of you. If you have used, or if you have integrated an analytical tool like GameAnalytics or like any of our competitors, you can get a lot of metrics out of your game. You can tell you a lot about what's going on inside of the game. And here are some numbers from this imaginary game. They are pretty average, a bit below average in the industry. They're not bad, but they're not good either. So what they mean is how many users are completing certain steps in the game, or how far into the game are they coming. So we always say that the users that are installing your game, that's the base number, that's 100%. And then further down, we want to see how many drop off at certain stages. So we see that there's 40% completing the tutorial of the game. This is a pretty typical number. It can be higher in some games, but it's pretty typical. And 30% of the new users return then on the following day of the game. So if you have 100 users installing your game today, retention rate for day one of 30% means that 30 users will come back tomorrow and play the game. Retention is a very standard metric of measuring engagement. And a game that has higher retention than another game will typically always also be a more successful game. It's not always true, but it's kind of a typical truth. We also see that 10% of our users tell their friends. They will actually invite their friends into the game. And 1% of the users end up becoming paying users. If you put this into the loop, it looks something like this. So we see that there's not many users that make it all the way into monetizing or telling their friends about the game, which means that there's not so much money you can spend on marketing or paying your salary and so on. We see that if there's 30% of users that complete the tutorial and return on day one, it also means that there's 70% of users that are not doing this. So if we think, let's try to get as many users to the later steps as possible because we want to make more money so we can fund this game, the next game, and so on, we need to look at why are people dropping off so early in the game. So if you think of it another way, if you have a lot of money to spend on marketing, if your numbers look like this, it might not be worth spending a ton of money on marketing because you will not get much back. But if we improve our game a bit, we can then spend a lot of money on marketing and then double our money. That's kind of how this loop is supposed to work. So there is an equation describing this. There's a lot of spreadsheets out there on the internet kind of doing forecasts where you can plug in your own numbers from your own game and see how it's going to perform. So I'm not going to go too much into detail on all of this. This is like a 5-hour topic, and this whole industry is around certain parts of this. I'm only going to focus on why are users not making it through the loop. And that focus starts with why are users not completing the tutorial. So in my ultimate drag racing game, we have some steps in the tutorial. These are typical steps of the first session where we want to teach the user how the controls work, what is the story of the game, and so on. So in this specific game, after you have loaded the game, you are presented with the option of buying a car. And I'm going to force you to buy a Toyota Supra. You race that car once. You will win the first race, because it's the first session. I want users to feel good. And you will earn some money from winning that race. Then you go into the store in the game and you buy a turbo, a really big turbo. This turbo needs to be delivered from the warehouse. The mechanic needs to fit it into the car. It's going to take some time. So we're asking the user to wait maybe 5 minutes. This is a typical pattern in free-to-play game that you have to wait for some time for stuff to happen, or you can boost the upgrade using in-game virtual currency. So you have a premium currency in the game that you can use to get the DHL Express delivery and get the mechanic to work really, really fast. So we're going to force the user to do this in the tutorial to teach them this mechanic. Once you have the new big turbo, you can race your car again, this time against a faster car. And then you see that you win, and you earn some more money, and thus the game loop has started. People now understand, I race, I earn money, I upgrade my car, I buy a bigger car, I race against a bigger car, I earn more and more money. That's kind of the career path of a player in this game. So if you're using a tool like GameAnalytics or just a general analytics tool, you can then create something that's called a funnel out of this. So really what we're interested in, we want to see how many people install the game and then complete the certain steps in this first session. So we want to see where they drop off. And if you do that, you might get numbers that look something like this. It might be a graph that looks something like this. It is explaining what percentage of users are completing each and every step. So there are some things that stand out in these steps. We see that in the beginning of the game, there's a large drop-off. That is, when it's such a big drop-off as 20%, this is a very suspicious drop-off, so there might be something funky going on there. We see also that there's two other kind of big drop-offs, and this is during the racing part of the game. So I'm going to focus a bit on the racing part first. I also added in the kind of downstream events. If we think back to the loop, we can see then the later numbers here, because we're going to see how they are improved when we improve our game. Sorry. So if we take off our analytical hat and put on our game design hat, or we show these numbers to our game designers, we might then start thinking, what is really going on inside of the game? So if you take the racing, for example, we can then do a play test. We ask the users to play our game, and we see how they do. And then maybe we ask them, did they like it, or did they have any problems or something? Or maybe we already have an intuitive feeling of what is wrong, and then just seeing that there's a problem there kind of already confirms that we know what we already know. So in my drag racing game, my first controls had a clutch, a throttle, a brake, the shifter, and the steering. And it turns out that on a mobile device, and with the audience on a mobile device, this is actually ridiculously hard to play. So we come up with simpler controls, and let's say we only have the gear shifter control. If we then put on our analytical hat again, we must start thinking, let's see if our new version is performing any better. And what we do is we show the new controls, the simpler controls, to half the users, and the old controls to the other half of the users. And then we can see, was there any improvement with the new controls? We can see, did the new controls cause an improvement, or was it due to some other change we made in the game? So this is called an A/B test, or an A/B experiment. So A/B comes from the fact that you have two groups, A and B. And if you are doing many changes at a time, you might also have A, B, C, and so on. So we see here that the blue line is the improved controls, and it is, in fact, performing objectively better at our goal. So we want to get as many users to perform the later steps as possible. So this new version objectively does a better job at that than the old version. So now there can be no discussion about the cool new controls you made. They are, in fact, objectively better. Let's look a bit at these first steps in the game. So when there is such a big drop as 20% in a game, there is something funky going on. So if you think as a game designer, we might say there might be a very big problem in the game. Or that maybe there is something in the game that the developers did not instrument in the tutorial, for example. It might be a missing step that we not see here. It could also be that people are looking for a first-person shooter, and then they come to a drag racing game and they say, I'm not going to play that game. So we have to accept that we will never get 100% completion rate. There will always be people that don't like the game, or their boss just walks in, so they need to quit the game immediately and stuff like this. But we can always do better. Right? That's what this is about. So we noticed that we forgot to instrument a specific step where we ask the user to put in his name into the game. So we want to present a leaderboard with the name of the user. We want to have dialogues where we can greet the user by his name, and thus we are asking the user to enter in his name, or nickname, or whatever. As a game designer, you might then think, this is maybe not the best point in time to ask for the name of the user. The user just launches an app, and the first thing the app asks is for the name of the user, without the app having proven that the app is worthy of the name. So we might say, let us move the name step to a later point in the game. So after playing a few races in the game, then we ask for the name of the user. And the same rules best practices applies to stuff like asking for push notifications or asking for the Facebook login. So only when a user is familiar with the game and thinks the game is worthy of his time, then we should start asking for permission to send push notifications and a Facebook login. Then users are much more likely to do those things. So again, we have a new version of our game. We release it again, we do an A/B test again, we see that there's again improvement in the numbers. And we see it's not like completely a 20% all over the board. There's still users dropping off here and there, but it will always be like this. And that's just something we have to accept. Also, it's just example numbers, so of course your game will be different. So as a summary of our improvements, we see that we increased the number of people that complete the tutorial quite a lot. The same thing for the people that are returning on the following day of the gameplay, but the people that invite their friends and the people that end up paying money, we doubled the number of those people, just by doing some relatively minor changes to very early on in our game. And this doubling in virality and doubling in monetization might mean that we're actually making twice the amount of money, which we can then fund back in again into marketing of a game and then make 4 times as much money and so on. That's how the loop works. So, try to offer some conclusion about this. As I said in the beginning, you can use analytics to inform yourself about what is going on in your game. So if you just release a game, you see you're not making any money, users are not saying anything about the game, it might be because there's a technical problem or a game design problem or something like this, and analytics can help you know what is going on. That's it. They cannot do anything more than tell you what is going on. And also I hope that I show that common sense goes a very long way. So there's nothing extremely advanced about this. You don't need to know a lot about statistics or about these kind of fancy words like acquisition and so on. It's all kind of pretty straightforward. You want people to be happy in your game, and happy players, if they're given the opportunity, they might actually pay money in your game. Any questions? At the back? So the question is, how do you do A/B testing on mobile? And this is very hard, since you have the whole App Store approval process on. It might take weeks before your new stuff is inside of the game. So what we see people doing is that they do it exactly the same way as they do it on Facebook and so on. It's just you have a much longer lead time before you can run the test. There's also been some like cool developments that with tools and services that can help you make it easier to do A/B tests. And we see people are thinking kind of quite far ahead, that they're already kind of planning which A/B tests they want to do in the future and already changing the game so that they can do that at runtime. So you would ask a server for some kind of configuration for your game, and based on this configuration, the game is going to change. And then this configuration, since it's stored on a server, you can update it whenever you want, not necessarily when Apple wants you to update it. Especially for prices in the virtual store inside of the game, this might all just every day be pulled from a configuration file, so you have fresh prices every day. Also, you can have fresh products every day, for example, if you have already made it possible to add arbitrary assets into a virtual world, for example, or in the case of the drag racing game, I can build bigger turbos just by adding a new line in the configuration file, so I can push that out to the game without Apple's approval. There was a service, I do not remember exactly the name, but it was acquired by Twitter. I cannot, unfortunately, I don't know off the top of my head the name of a service like this. The customers we see, they are actually implementing this in-house. It is also something as GameAnalytics that we are actually thinking about, can we support developers in A/B testing automatically their games and so on, but it's a bit into the future. I'm happy to take questions afterwards about details of those plans if you want. Question over there.
Yeah. GameAnalytics recently went free about a week ago.
Yeah.
What are some of the benefits that previously only available to paid users that are now available to?
Okay, so the question was, what are the benefits? Oh, sorry. Since GameAnalytics went free a week ago, what is the difference between the paid and the free version, and what has changed now? Our paid plans before was based on how much data you were sending us. So there was the same product for everybody. It was just when you have a lot of data, it starts costing us a lot of money. So then we started charging you the same money. So with our new kind of free free plan, it is exactly the same product as we had before. There's no kind of premium product. Everything is in there. It's a really awesome tool. And we're working on then some kind of pro features on the side. So it's not going to cripple the free version, and it's just going to be a different feature that we're going to charge money for. That's how we're going to make our money. Question over there?
Yeah, when you're analyzing a funnel, should you always target the early bad step, or should you just look for the biggest drops? Because I noticed there were some later big drops that you didn't call out. How come those ones weren't the ones that you focused on? Like if you go to the original one where you had 3 red lines underlining the big drops, and there was just a single line. Yeah, here we go. So how come the 60 to 40 drop wasn't targeted, or the 30 to 10 near the end?
Yeah. So the question is, why are we not addressing these later massively big drops? Why are we only doing the earlier ones? So there's 2 reasons. One is that these later drops, I added them in there. It's not really part of the funnel. It's just like for display. The other reason is that if you make improvements early on, they're going to have really big effects, trickle-down effects for later. So we saw that if we did these early on improvements, we double our numbers a bit further down. So that's why we want to kind of catch the fish as early as possible. It is all to do with how you convince a user that your game is really awesome. Like if you can do it in 10 seconds, then you kind of won that user forever.
But aren't these users that you lose at the beginning kind of the impatient users anyway? Aren't the ones that you're losing later on more valuable because they've already stuck with it?
That might be the case, yeah. Yeah, it's no exact science. Of course, if you can improve all the numbers, that is the best thing. So yes, definitely the return rate on the next day, this is also a very important number, and you will typically see people, yeah, they like the game, but they were not interested. They might play the tutorial, but they will not return on the following day. So then you might have a big drop. Yeah, it's a good question. Any more questions? Okay, I will be around. We also have a booth. Please come by and ask me any questions if you have. Thank you very much.